The roar of artillery splits the desert night open, and sand rains down from the heavens as if the whole world is collapsing. Smoke and flame and the scream of men mix into one endless howl. In the choking dust, a young Australian soldier named Michael Jackson digs his helmet deeper into the dirt, pressing his body against the trembling trench wall, gripping his Lenfield with hands that will not stop shaking, no matter how hard he wills them to stillness. Above him, flares burst into white suns that throw every jagged shadow of wire, crater, and corpse into sharp relief before darkness swallows it all again. He tells himself to breathe, but the air tastes of cordite and death. Beside him, Corporal Harris crashes down into the trench, coughing, spitting grit, his eyes wide as the earth itself shudders under the weight of incoming mortar fire. Ara shouts through the thunder that they are coming in waves. Germans and Italians push forward after the dive bombers soften the lines. That if they hold the perimeter, they hold the port. And if Tobruk falls, then the road to Egypt and the Suez lies open. Michael wants to reply, but another shell detonates just above the trench and drives him into the dirt. His ears ringing like church bells, visions swimming in fire and sand. When he dares to look up over the rim of the trench, he sees them moving, bayonets flashing under the moon, silhouettes slipping through smoke, German voices barking commands. He feels the crawling terror in his gut, but Harris jams the magazine into the Bren and growls, "Steady now. Wait till you see their teeth." In that instant, the first wave erupts from the dust and the Bren spits fire, bullets stitching through the night. And Michael squeezes his trigger, the recoil slamming his shoulder again and again as he fires blind. Muzzle flash illuminates faces twisted in rage and fear. Men falling, stumbling, screaming, the ground erupting as grenades scatter dirt and shrapnel into the air. The trench shakes as if it will collapse. And when a body tumbles in beside him, Michael cannot help but look into the lifeless eyes of a man who only moments ago was alive, sweat and blood dripping into the sand. Harris shouts at him to keep firing. Keep firing for God's sake, and so he does. Fumbling cartridges into the magazine, hands slippery, pulling the trigger until his ears are numb and his lungs are raw. Another flare blooms overhead, and in that ghostly light he sees it all. Broken trucks still burning barbed wire snarled with torn flesh. Tanks silent, like dead beasts. Men crawling forward on hands and knees across the desert floor like insects beneath a cruel magnifying glass. When the flare fades, it is as if the earth itself exhales and swallows everything back into darkness. Every second stretches into an eternity, and he thinks not of empire, not of Churchill, nor of lines on a map, but only of Harris. Beside him, of the men who depend on his rifle to fire, of the sheer animal need to live one more dawn. Just as that thought flickers through his mind, Harris is hit. A round slams into his chest and throws him back against the trench wall. Michael screams, dropping his rifle to clutch his friend, whispering, "Stay with me. Don't you dare leave."
Harris coughs, blood choking, his hand gripping Michael's sleeve just once before his eyes cloud and his head falls and the noise of the battle fills the silence that follows.
Michael stares, then reaches for the Bren gun, rage coursing through his veins. He mounts it on the trench wall and squeezes the trigger until the barrel is hot and the recoil bruises his shoulder, mowing through the shadows rushing at them. Screaming as if he can somehow drown out the sound of Harris's last breath. Other Australians surge forward past him, grenades flying, bayonets gleaming, charging into the smoke and dust. Michael follows, stumbling over bodies, some German, some his own, some twitching, some still whispering for water they will never drink, and the ground itself begins to groan beneath the treads of a panzer, rolling forward, its turret sweeping like the eye of some mechanical beast, the metal grinding the fallen into the earth, as though the desert is swallowing them whole. Michael freezes, terror locking his limbs, till a captured Italian anti-tank gun blasts to life beside him, its crew screaming as they slam a shell into the panzer's flank. With a deafening roar, the tank belches smoke and fire, its hatch bursting open as blackened figures claw their way out, stumbling aflame across the sand, their shrieks tearing through the night until silence claims them. Michael coughs on the fumes, choking, his eyes watering, the desert glowing with fire, the sky painted in smoke, and still, the fighting rages, endless, without mercy. He ducks into a dugout for water, but finds only the wounded men sprawled on stretchers or bare ground. One missing half a leg as a medic presses, cloth against the wound, whispering promises of survival that both know are lies, another begging for morphine that has long since run dry. Michael turns away, throat tight, knowing there is no comfort here, no salvation in the dugouts. Only the slow decay of men, caught between shells and disease. He stumbles back into the night air, the desert wind cutting hot across his face, carrying with it the stench of cordite and blood, the sharp tang of burning oil. Around him, the battle continues in stuttering waves, gunfire rolling across the line like a storm that refuses to pass. He crouches low, crawling between broken stretches of trench, his rifle bouncing against his chest, ears twitching at every whistle of incoming mortar. The sand beneath him is hot, clinging to his sweat-soaked skin, and with every movement, he feels as though the desert itself is swallowing him, pulling him closer to the fate of those already buried shallow in the shifting earth. By dawn, the assault has broken off. The Germans retreat, leaving the ground littered with their dead. The silence that follows is worse than the thunder of battle, a heavy, oppressive weight that presses down on the survivors. Michael sits slumped against the wall of the trench, his throat raw, his eyes bloodshot, his hands trembling uncontrollably as he tries to roll a cigarette from the last scraps of tobacco left in his kit. The paper tears twice before he manages to light it. And when he draws the smoke into his lungs, it makes him cough until he tastes iron. Around him, other Australians move slowly, dazed, carrying the wounded to improvised posts, dragging the dead into shallow pits. Harris is gone, and Michael feels the absence like a stone in his chest, a silence louder than any shell. The days that follow blur into one another. Sun rises, and with it comes the heat, oppressive and merciless, baking the trenches until the air itself shimmers. Flies swarm in black clouds, crawling over food, wounds, lips, and eyes, bothered by the swatting hands of soldiers too weak to fight them off. Dysentery spreads like wildfire, leaving men doubled over in the dust, their bodies racked by fever and thirst. Water is rationed to the last drop, each man clutching his tin like treasure, sipping only enough to wet his lips, dreaming of rivers of rain, anything but the endless parched hell of Tobruk. Every night, the shelling begins again. The Germans know their guns reach farther, hit harder, and they pound the Australian lines relentlessly, hour after hour, trying to grind the defenders into dust. The ground shakes, trenches collapse, and yet the Australians dig deeper, clawing into the earth like the rats they have been mocked as. Michael finds himself laughing bitterly at the nickname when he hears it first on a crackling German broadcast, the voice sneering about the Rats of Tobruk. It is meant to break them, but instead, it hardens them. They are rats, yes, gnawing, burrowing, surviving in holes, scurrying through the night to strike and vanish before the enemy can crush them. Rats endure. On one moonless night, Michael is chosen for a patrol. They slip out of the wire in silence, 10 men in the dark, crawling low across the sand. Their task is simple and suicidal. Harass the enemy, cut throats if they can. Throw grenades into dugouts, keep the Germans awake, afraid, uncertain. The night is cold, the sand biting against his skin, and every breath sounds too loud in his ears. Ahead, he sees the faint glow of a cigarette and freezes. The officer gestures, and 2 men creep forward, knives drawn, a muffled cry, a struggle in the dark, then silence. The patrol moves on. Michael's heart hammers as he grips his rifle, fingers slick with sweat despite the chill. They reach the edge of the enemy line, toss grenades, hear the satisfying thump of detonations, and the shouts of confusion. Then retreat into the desert night, vanishing like ghosts before the counterfire can find them. Back in the trenches, they collapse in exhaustion, laughing with the wild relief of men who cheated death once more. For Michael, it is a hollow laughter. For every night, more men go out than return, and he feels the weight of each missing face. The days stretch into weeks, the weeks into months, and still Rommel's Afrika Korps cannot break them. The Australians hold Tobruk, a thorn in the side of the desert fox, a fortress of dust and stubbornness. Michael watches comrades waste away, skin stretched thin over bone, eyes hollow but still burning with defiance. He learns to ignore hunger, to push through fear, to measure life not in days, but in the simple act of still breathing when the sun rises. One afternoon, the Stukas come again. The shriek of their dive rattles the marrow in his bones. The bombs fall like thunderbolts, tearing trenches apart, throwing men like ragdolls, fire blossoming in the desert heat. Michael is buried in sand, choking, clawing his way free, his ears bleeding from the concussion, stumbles through smoke and flame, finds a man screaming with both legs gone, and drags him back toward cover, even as machine gun fire rakes the ground around them. He cannot remember how long it takes, only that his muscles scream and his throat is raw from shouting for help that never comes. By nightfall, the line still holds, though it feels more like a graveyard than a fortress. And still, through it all, they endure.